Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Pacific Palisades Garden Club November meeting. Tonight we are welcoming Jeff Moore of Solana Succulents. And Jeff is a longtime, how can you say it? Lover, appreciator, raiser, and cultivator of succulents of all kinds. He has 5 books that he has written over the past 30 to 35 years of his dream life in the succulent world. And he came to present a program for us just before COVID started. And that was in February of 2020. And that was on the Wonderful World of Succulents and featured a lot of different water, friendly plants, as well as those that are involved in the landscape. And tonight he's going to talk with us more about spiny succulents. And he also has a brand new book out that's on agaves. So we might just have to bring him back again for agaves. So I'm going to go ahead and mute all of you except for Jeff. And okay. I'm going to unmute Jeff. Are you unmuting Jeff? Uh-oh. Oh, no.
Jeff's on mute.
I know. I'm asking him to unmute. All right, unmute. I guess I have to unmute everybody. Let's unmute then. Okay. I asked him to unmute. Jeff, maybe go back out and come back in. Are you able to hear me? You just have to unmute. Can you see where it says unmute?
Mary, why don't you?
Okay, how about
there
now?
You go.
How about that? This is my wife, Lori, my helper.
There you go. All right, sorry for the delay, everyone. So without further ado, Jeff Moore.
Well, thank you. Sorry about that problem. We thought we had it all ironed out. One thing I want to ask you, on my screen, remember I told you I can't find my cursor, it just doesn't show up?
Yes.
I've got a big thing that says the meeting is being recorded in front of my image. You guys don't see that, do you?
It's in the upper left-hand corner.
Look, you can't find the cursor. It disappears. Well, as long as you guys don't see it, we're good to go then.
No, we just see spiny succulents.
Okay, you don't have a big black screen in the middle of it. Okay, I'm good. I can see around that. So thank you guys for bearing in here.
Doesn't Jeff have to click or just click on it to accept it and then it'll go away?
Yeah, but here's the problem. My cursor, I can't find it. I'm scrolling around. It disappears for some reason, unless I accidentally run over something and I can find it. So I've been scrolling all around the middle of the screen and I got a blue got it box and I can't click it. So I'm okay on my end if you're okay on your end.
We're good.
Okay. So thank you guys. This is book number 4. I did a book on soft succulents, and this one is about all the spiny guys, cactus, euphorbias. I know I'm talking to a garden club and not a cactus club. I do talk to cactus clubs quite a bit, and this is kind of right up their alley. You guys, probably a few of you like the spiny stuff, a lot of you don't, but I think you're selling yourself short if you don't. So I'm going to try to convince you that these are wonderful plants as well. The cover photo of the book here, that's a red flower golden beryl, which you don't see very often. Golden beryl is one of the more popular plants in cactus and cultivation. So my first book, bottom right-hand corner, is Under the Spell of Succulents. It's about the whole hobby. I did well enough. I was able to do a second book called Aloes and Agaves, which is, I'm basically sold out on. I have a handful left at the nursery. My third book was Soft Succulents, about all the ones that won't spine you. That's actually what most people think about when you mention the word succulent, although succulents includes all, all the plants that hold water, desert plants like cactus, agaves, euphorbias, all of those. And then the fourth book was the one we're talking about now. The fifth book is about just about agaves. I co-wrote that with a friend of mine, Jeremy Spath. It's a really beautiful book. But on to this one here. So these the commonality. These are all succulent plants that a common feature is spines. And at first, when you might be repulsed by some of these spines, after a while you get to appreciate these plants for their spines. How gnarly some of them are armed. This is kind of a funny. I'm assuming you guys can follow. I don't know if there's a lag. You see the pictures of the funny looking fox there. And the reason I put that on there is when I'm doing a live talk, it's kind of harder to do the back and forth. I ask people, why do you think cactus have spines? And one of the most common answers is, well, protection. And that is true. A secondary thing that they do, just as the ears of that fox or the sail fin of that, what is called the Dimetrodon, I believe, that dinosaur, the function of those is as much to radiate heat away from the plant as possible. And that's also one of the functions of spines, is they radiate heat away from the cactus. They did an experiment where they cut the spines off a couple ones and they left spines on others, and the interior body temperature of the ones where the spines were cut off was much, much hotter. So they are also heat radiating devices. And this talk sort of follows along with the flow of the book. So before we get into the various species, I talk a little bit about growing and handling everything. People ask me if I wear gloves a lot, and I really don't very often, because most cactus spines go right through most gloves, unless you're talking about welder's gloves, and they give you a false sense of security. So as you see how these guys are handling, they are wearing gloves, but they also, that's the cradle method. That's how I usually move cactus around. You just wrap something around it, something between the spines and your fingers, get them on the ground. I use my boots, I kick them around. You can be pretty tough with these plants. People ask me what kind of cactus and succulents are great for indoors. And this is what you want to have indoors. It's something like a yarn cactus or glass or plastic. These plants love sun. So unless you have a very sunny window with direct sun for at least a couple hours where the plant is basically touching the window, do not think of cactus and succulents really as indoor plants. I mean, sometimes they will adjust to a lower light, but they'll stretch, they'll lose their color, they won't flower as much. They're happier out on your patio or porch or in the ground in your yard than they are indoors, unless they're in a very bright, south, east, or west facing window. So this book's going to talk about some of the major groups. You see, other than cactus, you see on the top left, that's a euphorbia. That's in Fullerton, California. Bottom is the terrestrial bromeliads. Those are generally spiny, very succulent-like plants. Bottom middle are the pachypodiums from Madagascar. Top middle are the the Fucarias, the Ocotillos from the U.S. Southwest, and the right is Alawadia, which is sort of the Madagascar version of Ocotillo. But we'll talk more about those coming up. I do mention in the book, we talk a little bit about the growers, where they come from. Very few of these plants are native. There are some native ornamental cactus from the Southwest U.S., but most of these beautiful plants, cactus, are from Mexico, South America. The cactiform and the spiny euphorbias are mostly from Africa and Madagascar. But we're so lucky we can grow all this stuff here. We have the most ideal climate. We're very, very fortunate to how many different things we can grow. This is a wholesale grower in Vista where there's a lot of growers, Altman's plants. I just like this. I wish I would have had a picture of what this looked like probably 30 years or 25 years before they planted this. It was just a series of little 1 gallon or 5 gallon plants spaced apart, and look how happy they are. And they probably don't even irrigate this anymore. Once they take off, they take off. They stay put. They're not invasive plants for 99% of them, but they do learn to live here well. And you can have all kinds of wonderful contrasts with these plants. That's a blue cactus, Pilosocereus from Brazil, winding up through variegated Euphorbia amec succulents from Africa. So there's all kinds of crazy juxtapositions you can do with some of these very sculptural plants. And here's a little bit about the growers. That's the fun part of my job. When I got into this, I realized right off the bat that inland North County, San Diego is sort of the world capital of succulent growers. Western cactus, Altman's plants, a whole bunch of smaller growers, backyard growers. The climate, and really all of Southern California, especially if you're about 5, 10, 15 miles inland, is just ideal for growing cactus and succulents. And so whether they're greenhouse grown or grown in the ground, I like to go out and cherry pick stuff out of the ground because it's already hardened off and used to the sun. Sometimes if you get a succulent and if it's been in the store in lower light, you put it out in the sun, and even the coast, it might burn at first. You think they don't like the sun. Well, they probably do. They just, if the plant has been in low light for a long time, it has to adjust a little bit. But these plants here are all hardened off in full sun. And if you guys have questions, is everyone unmuted, or is the rest of the cast unmuted? Well, anyway, if you guys have any questions as I go, please chime in at any time, either through the moderator or if I can hear you, I'll be happy to answer questions as we go.
Yes, if anyone has a question, just unmute yourself at a space and go ahead and ask your question if he's good with that.
So flowers, people sometimes ask me, do these things flower? Well, yeah, pretty much everything flowers at some point. This is a field of Echinopsis or Trichoceros hybrids in inland North County, San Diego. These plants are pretty much hybridized for their flowers. And they exist in nature, probably mostly in the white form, but in cultivation, we isolate for colors, and we have all these beautiful colors of these plants now. There's usually a big spring blooming event like this for a couple of weeks in usually April or May. And then most of these plants will flower off on and off throughout the summer months, the warm months, but it's usually one big blooming event like is happening here. My friend took this picture at a wholesale grower. He was the only person to see this other than the 2 or 3 guys that work those fields. But they will pop these out and put them in the 5 or 10, 15-gallon pots and get them out to the retailers. Collectors, plant lovers, you guys probably have something. Some of you have something like this at your house, whether they're on a patio or however. This person is into it, but they're not as into it as you're going to see in just a little bit. I'm sure you know the mentality. This grower or collector is a little bit more of an enthusiast. You see, they've gone more for top dressing and nice plant combinations. I have a lot of photos, so I'm going through this pretty quickly. If you want me to stop, please let me know, or go back to one. And if you have a small apartment, if you don't have a lot of room or don't have any ground to plant, these are just wonderful plants for if you have a sunny location for a windowsill gardening or out, not windowsill so much, but out on the patio gardening. And these little plants, little cactus, mammillarias, can live in small pots for many, many, many years. And, they spend most of their life not in flower, but when they bloom, usually in the springtime, it's really it's a nice thing. And this is an example of a more serious collector. This gentleman's up in the San Luis Obispo, and these are show plants. If you ever get a chance to go to one of the cactus and succulent shows, especially up there in Los Angeles, so those of you, I'm sure some of you have been, but the intercity show at the Los Angeles Arboretum, it's usually in the middle of August every year, it's the biggest cactus and succulent show in the world, I believe. It's like Comic-Con for cactus and succulent enthusiasts. It's really worth checking out. This is another collector's greenhouse. Just some of these plants can live outdoors in the sun, but if you do have a greenhouse, sometimes it's a little more forgiving, especially in the winter months. That keeps them looking a little bit better. And this is my friend Joe up in Santa Barbara. Some people might think he has a little bit of a problem, but I don't. I've got a little bit of this in me too. The fun of you get collecting things. You get one of these, you want one of those. Your friend gives you one of these, you end up with a collection. When Joe first, I've been buying plants from him for a long time, but he didn't have a backyard greenhouse. He finally got himself a greenhouse, mostly for propagation. And I remember he told me at the time, he goes, I finally have room. I finally have a greenhouse. And then he calls me 6 months later and said, my greenhouse is full. You got to help me empty it out, because he's a good propagator. He's good about turning plants into more plants. He orders stuff from Thailand and Europe and different places. There's a real web of connectors that grow the very rare and the unusual, and he's into that. That's just a little close up of some of the wonderful, unusual plants. If it's regular, if it's normal and available, he doesn't want it. He really goes for the oddball things, and I'm lucky that he's one of my sources. When I visit him, when I'm up in Santa Barbara, I always load up my truck with cuttings and new starts of some of his unusual collector plants. If you live outside of this region, that's what you can do if you've got the money for it. I gave some talks a couple of years ago to the Connecticut Cactus Club and the Massachusetts Cactus Club. They do exist back there, and they actually can grow these plants wonderfully if you have some kind of winter protection. This gentleman, I got lucky enough to tour his place. He's the owner of the Boston Dynamics that makes those robots, the robot dogs. He got fascinated with cactus and succulents, so he had himself a European style greenhouse built, and I was admired that he was able to pull this off. It really was a wonderful thing. However, we don't have to do that here. The only reason really to have a small greenhouse here is for ease of propagation, or for protecting the handful of plants that don't like our winters. There are some cactus and succulents that they're used to a drier winter, but for the most part, we don't really need greenhouses here. If you're planting in the ground, you can mix and match these things. I mean, cactus are pretty sharp sculptural plants, but if you, like in this case, you see one with there's an aloe growing in there, they've got little wildflowers and daisies and things growing around it. You can mix and match with succulents and other drought tolerant plants, as long as they're on the same watering schedule, which is roughly once a week-ish in the non-rainy season, is kind of whether in containers or in the ground. The longer plants are in the ground, the more you can cut back on that watering schedule. But I do tell people that most of these plants that are not native here, which is most of them, they are primarily from places that do get summer rain, which we don't. So even though they're low water plants, most cactus and succulents, they really appreciate a summertime drink. You're not going to rot them by giving them a good soaking, once every week or two over the summer months, over the non-rainy season. And then in the wintertime, you just shut the water off and let, in a typical winter, if we ever get back there, I don't water much from November through March, say. This is Lotus Land. I would wager maybe a few of you have been to Lotus Land. It's up in Santa Barbara, Montecito. That place is magic. If you ever get a chance, you have to get on it. You have to make reservations to visit that place. It's an old estate that is just a fantastic garden. And they have a wonderful columnar cactus garden up there. So if you get a chance to visit Lotus Land in Santa Barbara, it's right up there with the Huntington as far as one of the greatest botanical gardens in the world, especially for cactus and succulents and cycads and dragon trees and all kinds of stuff. I added this a while ago. A couple years ago, I got my first trip to England. I managed to get to Kew Gardens, and they did have a Mediterranean greenhouse, and they had wonderful things there. So they do grow succulents all over the world. It's just a lot more work for them because they have to protect them for at least half the year, where, again, we can just grow all this stuff outdoors here. Now we're into euphorbias. Now euphorbias are from all over the world, but most of the succulent euphorbias that we like are African or Canary Islands, Madagascar in origin, but they all grow wonderfully here. This big green thing that if you're new to this, you think that's a big green cactus. Well, it's not. That is Euphorbia ingens or ingens. They're from Africa, but they're all over Southern California. They can grow up the coast into the Central and Bay Area too, but they're kind of frost sensitive. So that, the farther north you go or the farther inland you go, you have a tougher time with them. But they become absolute trees over time. I've got one in my nursery that's just, it's a monster. I mean, people don't even see it when they walk in until they look up and they realize that they're standing under it. They get huge and they grow very fast relative for a succulent. And then there's weird forms of everything. There's always outliers and atypical forms. This is a pendant form. There's some kind of a monstrous growth quality to this particular Euphorbia ingens. It's the same plant as you just saw in the previous slide. This is a Balboa Park, and there's several around San Diego and other places where it's just in the genetics. This thing just crawls along the ground. That's how that one has decided to grow. There used to be a couple of these up at Lotus Land that unfortunately they had something killed them. They didn't do well. In the more practical sense, you probably recognize the one on the right. That's Euphorbia trigona. It's a nice green cactus-shaped thing that really is obviously not a cactus. It has little teeny spines on it, but not much. And they get leafy for most of the year when it's warm. The leaves can fall off in the cool of winter. That particular plant I photographed out in, I think, San Bernardino or Redlands, so it can take quite a bit of inland heat. It's a different Euphorbia. I believe it's called Abyssinica on the left. There's like 20,000 Euphorbias, of which I'm going to show you about 20 here, or 15. These are mostly the succulent cactiform Euphorbias. There's a lot of bushy types also. This is Euphorbia canariensis from the Canary Islands. Doesn't get nearly as big, but it forms a nice mound. It's anything that grows in the Canary Islands grows here. The dragon trees, aeoniums, the Pride of Madeira. There's a lot of wonderful plants from the Canary Islands that think they're natives here, because that's also a winter wet, summer dry place, very Mediterranean. And in the collector realm, again, these are some oddballs. That's a Euphorbia trigona with the beautiful red form to it. And the other one, we still haven't, it's a new discovery. I don't even have the proper name on that. It has this weird marbled kind of skin to it. That's, again, the collectors are always looking for the weird ones. Usually when I'm talking out loud to a group, I ask people, what do you think these plants have in common? So, but I'll tell you what it is. These are examples of plants that have been in low light. The one on the left is one of the medusoid euphorbias. It's supposed to be flat, like a saucer, little tentacles going out prostrate. I sold this to some people, and then I ended up visiting them a couple years later. I'm delivering some plants, and I found this. They showed it to me. It was in their bedroom. There were some windows, a skylight above, but it was very diffuse light. And so those little tentacles, they're just going up trying to find the light. It's not supposed to look like that. At this point, I don't know if I put it back outside, it might burn. It's been indoors for so long. So I said, well, just let it do its thing. The one on the right, that was an example of a gentleman back in the East Coast. He had that plant up until 6 inches tall. He gave it to a friend who really loved it. The friend put it in a low light situation, and you see the long skinny part in the middle. That's how it grew in the low light situation. Then eventually Art, he went to visit his friend and saw the poor situation that euphorbia was in, and he took it back, and see the fat part on top got back in good light again. That's what it's supposed to look like. So that's a little tale of not enough light, etiolation. These things like light, sun, direct sun, they can get them. I have a small section in all my books about the pests and diseases, which I hate to even include because it ruins my otherwise beautiful books, but you have to talk about that stuff. One of the more common things that I get questions about is why is my cactus yellow? And there's no one reason. I call it yellow cactus syndrome. It could be soil, it could be lack of nutrients, it could be just an unhappy plant. I mean, that plant on the right, it kind of looks pretty, it looks variegated, but it's not. They're both the same plant. That's Buxbaumia polylofa, I think. On the left, it's an example of the same plants at the Huntington Gardens, and they're expert growers there, and theirs have turned yellow too. They're supposed to be green. So sometimes stuff happens. I mean, we like succulents because they're low maintenance plants. We don't have to do much. You water once a week, give them good light, and that's 90% of it. Fertilizing does help sometimes. So if you have a very dilute, whatever kind of fertilizer you have, whether it's fish emulsion or Miracle Grow, half strength, quarter strength, a few times a year is about all I do. I like to minimalize it. Sometimes yellow plants will turn green with the new growth, but the yellow doesn't usually get better looking. And here's some examples, just some wonderful euphorbia shapes and forms. There's a lot of in the book I kind of break them down into the visual, how they're visually aligned. Like these are the mounding or clumping varieties. That's Euphorbia obesa or symmetrica on the bottom left, Polygona on the top right. That's an old clump of Euphorbia horrida at the Berkeley Botanic Garden. If you're ever up in the Bay Area, the Berkeley Botanic Garden is a wonderful place to visit for all kinds of plants, as is the Ruth Bancroft Garden in Walnut Creek. And that's Euphorbia obesa growing in the ground here in San Diego. So they call it the baseball plant or the golf ball plant. It's just a little unusual plant, not normally grown in ground. They're a little prone to rot if it's a really wet winter, but this one's been growing there for years. So if a plant gets happy, sometimes it'll stay happy where it's at. More mounding and clumping euphorbia. Again, these are all African plants that grow wonderful in California. The bottom, and even in Arizona, some of these, the bottom is Euphorbia resinifera. That's called the Moroccan mounds. They form a beautiful big mound. They'll get yellow flowers. Pretty much all these will have yellow flowers. And there's a bunch of what we call the medusoid ones. Earlier, you saw that one with the fingers that were stretching up. Well, this is kind of what they're supposed to look like. The beauty is both pulled back and up close. They're wonderful photo subjects. This is one of the Medusa euphorbias up close. And here's a pulled back version. Look at some of the other varieties. That's how they flower, top left. That's Euphorbia flanagani in flower. Top right is one that's cresting, a stem crest. We'll talk about cresting in just a little bit. That's a mutation where you get that brain look or unusual growth. Bottom left is an unidentified cactus show, Medusa euphorbia. I mean, what an alien looking plant. I mean, those of us that like strange, that's a good one. The one on the right is, bottom right is Euphorbia caput medusa. You can't really see the plant. It's on the right side there, not the pink flowers, but that's how it blooms on the right. You don't get these for the flowers, but it's always a bonus. This is Euphorbia buplurifolia, a beautiful show plant collection. I mean, a plant that's been properly staged. This is a gentleman up in Central California. It almost looks like to me like a little dwarf version of a cycad or a palm tree. Very slow growing. This plant's probably 30 years old. And good old sticks of fire. I'm sure you guys all know this. This appeared in cultivation somewhere in the late 90s. The original green pencil euphorbia has been around forever in California, probably for 100 years. And then somewhere in a nursery in Africa, one of them sported out an orange growth, and they propagated it, and it's gone around the world off in that one original cutting, so it's sort of become immortal. I'm a little bit over this plant myself because they get so big so fast. The color is beautiful, especially if you have a nice blue wall behind it. But it's a fast grower and they get to be a lot. So if you have one of these plants, put it in the back behind everything else, and be wary that you do have to occasionally cut them back. And all euphorbias have the white sap that you don't want to get in your eyes. Most people do not have a skin reaction to euphorbia sap. Some people do, but we all have don't like it in our eyes. So be careful handling euphorbias. I mentioned earlier that most of these plants, you don't get them for the flowers, but they're a bonus. But this would be an exception. These are Euphorbia millii. When Euphorbia millii, also known as crown of thorns, when they're happy, they bloom almost year round if they're in a nice sunny location. On the left is one of what they call the giant Thai hybrids. They hybridize these in Thailand for the big flowers. There's different colors. That's a nice pinkish one. On the right is just one of the mini Euphorbia millii cultivars. And again, when they're in the right position and they're happy, they don't stop flowering. And the spines is kind of the misnomer. They're not very spiny. You can run your fingers along those spines with most of them. There's a lot of leafy euphorbias. Top left, you probably recognize that. That's Euphorbia lambii. That's a very dense and full one. They're a little bit more airy than that. They're from the Canary Islands. They'll actually seed themselves here. Most of these plants will not seed themselves. This one will. You'll find little babies popping up around the parent. The two on the bottom, those are the Wolfenii and some of the more bushy ones that do grow in Southern California. I've noticed they grow a lot better up in Central and Northern California. I think they like it a little bit wetter and cooler, but we can grow these plants. So they're succulents, but they have more of the effect is more of a bushy kind of a pillowy plant than a real succulent looking thing. And there's just more Euphorbia xanthii is from Baja. It has really pretty two-colored flowers. It's kind of a pencil-y, sticky kind of plant. Bottom left, that's Petalanthus bracteata. That plant's got really popular the last 10 or 15 years. It's a nice, if you want a vertical succulent, it gets about maybe 5 to 6 feet tall, nice and full, has those unusual little flowers that hang down. It's a really good vertical succulent. And just some examples of show plants, people that love these things. If you have a nice plant, you want to present it properly. It has to earn its pot, but when you have a nice enough plant, you have the nice enough pot, this is how you present these things. So if you get a chance to go to one of the cactus succulent shows, Long Beach has a club. There's about 5 or 6 really good cactus clubs up in Los Angeles that you should check out their shows when they have them. But the big one again is that one at the LA Arboretum. It's always in August. It's called the Intercity Cactus and Succulent Show. Now we're into cactus. That's Myrtillocactus geometricans, sort of a dwarf form. It looks like a little sort of a bonsai version of a saguaro cactus, the shape of it. So cactus are New World. They're in the there's really no cactus from everything. Succulents are worldwide. The cactus family is New World only. And the general criteria for cactus, if it's super spiny, it's probably a cactus, but that's not a fast rule because there are some cactus, top right, for example, that are almost spineless. There are some non-cactus euphorbias that are, or non-cactus succulents that are very spiny. So the spiny rule is kind of true, but they are different plants. All cactus are succulents, but not all succulents are cactus. These are habitat photos. My books are about plants in cultivation, not 95% of it, but I do like to show when I can a few habitat examples of them growing in habitat. It's neat to see them where they're growing. I've not done a lot of habitat myself. I've done some Baja mostly. And it really is cool to see some of these plants in their native atmosphere. The Baja Cataviña Desert down in Baja is just wonderful. It's Jeff Chemnek on the top left with a plant. You'll never see one that big in cultivation. That's down in Mexico. That's a pharaoh cactus. That's a golden barrel in the habitat on the right. The golden barrel is one of the most common cactus that we grow in Southern California and Arizona. They're almost extinct in Mexico where they're from because see that lake behind there, they built a dam, they filled up the lake and it drowned 95% of the golden barrel habitat. So the surviving ones above the water line are the ones that made it down there. Luckily, we have a lot of, we grow them from seed like crazy up here. Earlier, I talked about cresting. I'm sure some of you know what that is. It's sort of a mutation that we can't force to happen, but when it does, we can cut them into more crests and they just give plants such character. You see that top middle plant, that's a cleistocactus that's partially crested and partially not. A lot of times they'll revert back to normal growth. So you see what the normal cactus looks like, and some of the growth just comes out crested. And if you cut off the crest and propagate it, That's how you make more crest. It's hard to do. I'm not a great grower. I don't like chopping up beautiful plants, but good growers will do that. Bottom left is really one of the best of all. That is a crested Mexican fence post cactus. Those are really hard to get, but they're just, look at those little dotted lines on that thing. It really is a specimen. And the top left is another, that's a mammillaria crest, where the two, you see the two normal growths on the top end up being the eyes, and the rest of it crested into a weird frog's mouth. This is, there you see, that's Trichoceres pachinoi, one of the psychedelic cactuses. Obviously, it's taking its own drugs and freaking out there, but you see the normal growth on the right and the crested growth on the left. This is Eulychnia spiralis, another unusual. There's a lot of weird things going on with this plant right here. Normally, the regular form of Eulychnia is a spiny plant. This form here will, not only will it spiral, as you see in front, but part of it will then turn around and crest behind it. So it's just another one of those strange things that happen. And there in the middle, that's the same as the plant on the left. That's just a great example of a crested Trichoceres pachinoi San Pedro cactus. It's just on your patio. They're little, to my opinion, they're little pieces of living art. They're little Picassos. And this is probably the best one really to own. And it is propagated quite a bit. I've got a lot of small ones of these in my nursery right now. This is the blue Myrtillocactus geometrosans crested form. There's no reversions on this. Sometimes you do get the blue regular reversions, but this was formerly a very rare one to get hold of, but there's growers, the guys that are good about chopping them up have been chopping them up, and there's a lot more of these available now. If you're going to have one crested plant, I'd recommend this one right here. There's also variegation in succulents, not in cactus, not as much as with some other plants, but you will find variegated, yellow stripe, white stripe examples of some of these plants.
What was the name of the last one you said?
It's a long name. It doesn't have a common name. It's Myrtillocactus geometrosans, and then crested form of it. The regular one is just a blue. In fact, you're going to see the same cactus coming up a little bit in the non-crested form. But that's the blue. It's the blue crested form of Myrtillocactus geometrosans.
Do you grow any of the aeoniums and
Yeah.
And do you have good luck with them year round, or do they?
Well, aeoniums, they're very coastal plants. They do great along the coast. The farther inland you go, they don't like the heat, and they're big Canary Island plants. They're used to a dry summer, so just they tend to shrink up as well. Just in the summertime they're kind of small, but that's normal. And they always look better in the fall, winter. But generally, most aeoniums grow good in coastal Southern California. This here is a Myrtillo. Remember, we just talked about that same Myrtillocactus geometrosans. This one is both crested and variegated on the same plant. So that's another thing that a collector would be looking for. If you ever get a chance to go down to Baja, or if not that, the San Diego Safari Park, Zoo Safari Park, or the Huntington, you'll see the Cardone cactus. That's basically our version of a saguaro. Saguaro cactuses from Arizona don't really like Southern California very much unless you're in the desert. But the Cardone cactus does grow well here. This is a very old, tall one, and the spines eventually on the top growth go away, and they get these little tufts. It's just a beautiful columnar, big cactus. If you're ever looking for a big columnar, it's called the Cardone. And that is the foot of a big Cirrus peruvianus monstro. So I have a section at the beginning of the cactus section of the big guys first. We go big to small in the book. And look at that melted foot. I think that's such a cool thing. That's probably a 100-year-old plant. If you do go to the Huntington, you'll see a lot of plants like this, big plants that have just been growing for a long time. On the left, that's in Mesa, Arizona. That's a organ pipe cactus, I believe. Someone pointed out that it's probably about as old as that car. That's probably a 1950s or 60s start to that thing. I don't think they realized how big it was going to be when they planted it. Same thing on the right. That's a nice big stand of Cirrus peruvianus growing in Dana Point, California. On the left here is the totem pole cactus. This is another sort of a freak. The normal form of this cactus is very spiny, but there's a couple of populations down in Baja where they grow weird without the spines. They grow in this muted, melted kind of form. And that's a very desirable ornamental. They like it hot. You can grow them in Southern California, but they grow better in Tucson and Phoenix. So for us, we have to place them next to a hot radiating sun type wall. On the right is Trichoceres pachinoi, those beautiful crests I showed you earlier. This is the regular non-crested form of it. It's a big plant and it flowers nicely. Almost spineless too. It's a cactus, but there's almost no spines to it. This is a grower's collection. You remember earlier I showed you those ones that were abnormally yellow? Well, they're supposed to look like this. This is a Neobux Bomia polylofa. I wish there was a common name, but there is not to my knowledge. This looks to me like a little regiment of soldiers getting ready to be assigned to their various owners. There are quite a few blue cacti. The blue tends to, like a lot of plants, the color comes out better in the cool winter months. I'm sure I took this photo in the wintertime at a grower in Vista. This is Pilosocereus azureus. Typically you see them 3 or 4 feet, but at an old nursery, they can get to be, 10, 12, 15 feet high. They're from Brazil. They're frost sensitive, but along the coast, they grow fine. If you ever have a really frosty area, you might have a little bit of an issue with them. There are a lot of hairy cactuses, and the fuzz, the hair, serves a couple purposes. They think, it kind of protects the plant from both getting too much sun and also slows down the expiration. It keeps the moisture within the plant. And also it probably collects dew a little bit too. So it just basically, the main function is to keep the plant from burning up. So there's different cactus that have evolved that look, quite a few. The left on the top left, that's the classic old man cactus, but the old man or old woman name gets applied to pretty much all the hairy ones. Yeah, that's Cephalocereus senilis, as in senile, like an old person, an old cactus. It's from that particular one, I think, is from Mexico. There's another old man of the Andes called Oreocereus. So again, there are different ones. Sometimes you see funny things on plants. These little guys have this is called a Hagiocereus, and the way the flowers come popping out, they look like little faces sometimes. And just some more abnormalities. That is a spiral form of what is normally a pretty spiny cactus from Baja. That's a rare thing to see one spiraling like that. On the right is that totem pole you saw earlier, and only it's spiraling also, which is another anomaly. This is the Myrtillocactus geometrozan in the green form. This is that beautiful blue crest you saw earlier. So this is how it would want to grow normally. Again, this is a greener form of it. So it doesn't get too tall, but it's a nice, thick, dense bush. This is a photo I took at one of the growers that I buy from. Theoretically, that's cutting stock, but I don't think they've cut on that one for a while.
What causes the spiraling? Is it the watering?
Nope, you
Or the
can't make
sun?
them spiral. There's no known cause for it. It's just nature. Every one in a million comes out weird, and that's the one the growers will isolate and grow and cut up and turn into more. They vegetatively propagate them. If you got seed from a spiral, maybe it's in the genetics. You can try growing a batch from seed. My friend is trying that right now with some spiral plants. Then the little seedlings are up there like 3 inches. They don't show any spiral yet, but we're hoping as they get bigger they might. So it might be genetic in it as opposed to environmental, but we don't know how to make it happen. It's just wonderful when it does. These are the various phaerocacti. These are nice barrel types. There's some of them bloom beautifully. They're really a nice landscape architectural plant. This is a form that just kind of like the spiraling or the cresting, and the spines are muted. Normally this cactus has spines on it, but sometimes the term is inermis, as in unarmed. So occasionally one comes out. It's a really blue cactus. It's called Phaerocactus glaucescens, and it's a really blue form. And it also there's a few spines on it, but for the most part the spines have been disabled on that.
How long does it take to grow seeds? I mean,
it's a process. They're so slow. I mean, I messed around with going from seed. For me, it just takes forever to get them big enough. I luckily have a lot of growers that have big greenhouses and a lot of space that are willing. It takes a couple years to even get a 3-inch, 4-inch plant sometimes with some of these guys. They're easy to grow, but they're slow. But it's fun, if you get. I've done aloes more than anything from seed. You collect seeds, you try it. It's a fun little backyard project. The hard part is not getting the seeds to sprout. It's to nurse them along the first year and actually have a lot of plants left. I tell people if you germinate 100 seedlings, 6 months later you got 30 left, you're doing great. If like 3 years later you end up with 5 plants, you did really good. It's just a numbers game. This is that red flowered phaerocactus that we saw earlier on the cover of my book. It's sort of a one of a kind. We have collected seed from this. A friend of mine did, and we're waiting for it to get big enough to bloom to see whether the bloom comes true. Because normally the golden barrel has a yellow flower against yellow spines. It doesn't show up that much, but to us this is a really pretty one. This is one of my few Baja trips. This is down in Cedros Island off of Baja. This is Phaerocactus chrysocanthus growing right along the water down in Baja. It really is fun to visit these things in nature. If you get a chance, especially a Baja trip, you can do bus trips down there with people that can tell you where to go. It's really fun to see these things in nature. This is about, I'm showing you some of the beautiful flowering cactus. You saw these earlier. This is the Echinopsis. This one's called the flying saucer because these flowers are like as big as a flying saucer. It's really an event. If you buy one of these, you'll take pictures of it every time it flowers every year. You don't need any more pictures, but you can't stop yourself. You have to take pictures of them when they flower. Yeah, that's the top left. That's an example. Look how big those flowers are compared to that little plant. On the bottom left, that's one of the mini epiphyllums, the orchid cactuses that they're just basically green things that kind of flop around like hanging plants, but when they flower, they're beautiful. And just more examples just to drive home the fact that we like these plants for their structural quality because their ease to grow, but boy, it really is just such a nice bonus when they bloom. That's an Echinopsis in my neighborhood. I took the photo on the left and I had made a point I had to come back the next day because the flower event can be brief. I mean, the flowers with some cactus, some of them are nighttime only. You know, if you hear the night blooming cereus, they only open at night and the first light they fade away. Most of them, that's not the case. Most of them, they last at least a day each flower. Sometimes a flowering event, multiple flowers over time. You get a few days to a week of the flowering event. And some flowers, if you have overcast conditions, the actual flower themselves will last 3 or 4 days before they finally go away. So again, they spend most of the time not in bloom, but look how, this is just a screenshot from my book, my page on some of the flowering ones, just to drive home the point that, and they're hybridizing all kinds of new colors. I mean, my friend Brent Wiggin lives in Lake Elsinore. He's one of many people that are crossing and back crossing to come up with new, great, fantastic colors and giving them names. It's hard to keep track of. They do grow right by the beach. You know, these plants are doing fine there. They might prefer to be 20 miles inland. They like the inland heat a little better, but most of these things will grow fine by the ocean. Mammillarias are a group of little spiny ones. By the way, cacti are hard to identify. I just wrote a book on, you know, spiny succulents cactus, and like in this group Mammillarias, where there's probably 150 species. I think when I started the book, I could name 10 of the species by sight. And now I think after writing the book, I can name 25 of the 150 species by sight. I mean, you really have to be a specialist to identify some of these things. But this is what mammillarias do. They're little clustering mounding things. On the left is an example of one of my favorites. That's Mammillaria spinosissima unpica, meaning one spine. There's only one little spine per areole. Usually there's like 3 or 4, a cluster of 3 or 4. There's just one little hairy spine per areole, and they have really pretty pink flowers that bloom in the winter. And the one on the right actually has a crested stem. You see that white line down the middle of it, it's cresting. And just fun in the details up close. This, I think, is a Gymnocalycium. Look at those little peas popping out of the middle of this thing, spiraling around as they grow. They're just, again, they're wonderful photo subjects to get in close with sometimes and have fun with your, all these, but by the way, most of these photos, the last 5 years, I'm taking them all with my iPhone. These iPhones are as good as, you know, all these phones are as good as cameras now. Sadly, I do miss my camera, but I don't use it much anymore. Copiapoa down in South America. This is a habitat photo. Chile, the plants in Chile, it's very similar climate to ours. The only difference is they don't get as much rain as we typically do. But these are Copiapoas are very, there's another cluster of Copiapoas. It looked like somebody staged that shot, but that's where it grows, right down by the beach in Chile. It just needs a little Corona beer and an umbrella next to it. Looks like an ad for Chile. More collector plants, Ariocarpus on the left, mellow cactus on the right, developed this thing called a cephalum. It's this little cottony top that some of them do. And little, looks like little chili peppers will come popping out their seed pods periodically. That's one of the peyotes on the bottom left, one of the psychedelic cacti. That's quite a specimen there. That's a crested Ariocarpus in a private collection in Arizona. And then my caption in the book was that I can't say where I saw this. I know nothing. And this plant is such a specimen that he doesn't even take it to the plant shows because it wouldn't be fair to the other plants. I think it would win all the blue ribbons. Looks just like stuff from some other planet. Astrophytums are these little cute little things that they hybridize for the white spots on them. In nature, there's a little bit of that, but not nearly as much as what people have done by crossing and back crossing. And they're crazy on this right now in Japan and Korea. And a lot of them these have Japanese or Korean names, hybrid names, cultivar names. That's an up close look at the spines of a cactus called the rainbow cactus. Here's some unusual ones. On the left, you saw that earlier, that's Eulychnia spiralis. On the right is the booby cactus. Obviously, you can see where that name came from. That's something that just appeared in cultivation probably 10 or 12 years ago. And it was like, you know, they were $500 on eBay for a little one. And now they're, you know, $40 for a little one. They're still kind of pricey, but not like they were. It's just another anomaly that popped out in the cultivation. These are small cactus called Robudias and sulcur Robudias. A gentleman up in the Central Valley specializes in these. They're all small. They fit in like 8 or 10 inch pots, and springtime flowering events for these guys. They're wonderful little plants. The Puntias, the prickly pear types, there's a lot of those. Sometimes you get unusual, there's cresting on the top left. The really cool spines on the one on the right. That's the Puntia sulfurea. On the left there, just naturally formed a heart, which is kind of cool. The bottom right, that's one of the purple ones. It's just like a series of little globes, little buckyballs all glued together that come in purple and turn green. Now, choyas, this is one cactus I love, but I will not allow in my nursery. I've heard enough horror stories and I've experienced a little bit. They have these little barbed spines that if you just touch them, they're on you and they break off in sections. They call it the jumping cactus because it seems like you didn't even touch them and they just jump on you. They don't really, but if you just barely brush them, they break off in sections and they're not fun to get out. So if you go to Arizona, they're beautifully backlit plants. They're all over the hills there, but this is one of the nasty ones that I'd recommend you don't try to grow. There's an example of the dragon fruit cactus, the Hyloceras, that's growing up a palm tree. Personally, I'm not a big fan of the dragon fruit. I don't think they're really that tasty, but it's a cool looking fruit. That's the rat tail cactus on the left. Now we're out of the cactus. We're in the back third of the book here. This is the Alawadias from Madagascar. They look like ocotillos, but they're not. They grow better here than ocotillos do. If you're familiar with ocotillos in the local deserts, Palm Springs. This is a form of Alawadi that grows procumbent along the ground and also grows upright. It's called the Didieria trolii. And that's just an up close. They are sharp and spiny, but unlike a cactus, you can slowly drag your fingers across those spines and they wouldn't be in your fingers, where cactus are a little more wicked. They actually, they wouldn't do that to a true cactus. But the spines serve their function. It protects the plant and it probably does radiate away the heat. Then there's the Madagascar palms. You guys have probably seen these, the Pachypodiums. This is the most common one, Pachypodium lameri. As they get older, they get that big bulbous base like that, and you can tell they are plumeria relatives. They bloom just like plumerias. If you've had one for a while, small one, it takes about 10 to 12 years, and they got to get about 3 or 4 feet high before they finally flower, and then the flowering event forces them to branch, so they become big multi-branched plants over time. And they're from Madagascar, but they grow great in Southern California. They can drop their leaves in the wintertime, but generally this is not one of the fussy ones that has to come indoors. You can leave them out dormant in the rain, and they'll as long as they're in a cactus mixed soil. We haven't talked about that. All these things in pots should be in a cactus or cactus and succulent mix. It has a lot of the white pumice or perlite in it, and really good drainage. Make sure there's a drainage hole in the bottom of the pot. Couple of show plants. These are both also Pachypodiums, same family, but these, instead of growing big, tall, they're kind of these fat bonsai looking things, Pachypodium succulentum and bispinosum. This is from a collector that lives in Long Beach. This is his collection. Pachypodium lalei saunders. I have a number of these at the nursery right now. They get real fat. In the succulent world, we love these. They're called caudiciforms, the fat plants. That's a water storing fat belly that just gives them such character. And they'll drop their leaves in the winter typically, but this one will flower nicely. They just have a nice shape to them. This is more your typical Fucaria ocotillo type plant. This one is from home, and its home is in Baja, but it grows well here. See the little red flowers in the top. And this is probably the king of the genus. This is the Bujum tree from Baja. There's some giant ones at the Huntington and Cal State Fullerton Arboretum. That's a wonderful arboretum too. There's San Diego Wild Animal Park. Excuse me, my phone's ringing. I should have turned that off. But anyways, these are a type of it's type of an ocotillo, but they get this big fat belly. They're big vertical. They're down. If you've been down to Baja, Central Baja, they get about 40 feet tall. Big, wonderful creatures, and they grow fine in Southern California. That's one on the right again. On the left is one of the really are the top middle, and on the left that's Fucaria purpussii. That's one of the holy grail plants for collectors of this genus. That's a couple of my friends down in mainland Mexican habitat that finally found the very isolated population where these plants live. They didn't take any home with them. They just took pictures and maybe some seeds. At the end of the book, I threw a couple of spiny things in that are kind of spiny that you wouldn't think belong, but it was author's prerogative. This, if you like cycads, and they're very expensive to collect, but they're sharp and spiny and they grow drought tolerant plants. They pretty much grow just like cactus and succulents. Most people that collect cactus and succulents also have a few cycads. And then there's terrestrial bromeliads. Some bromeliads are very jungly types. You know, they don't look succulent at all, but there's some really nice spiny ones like this one here. This is a hybrid called what's it called? Jeff Chemnick's hybrid. It's an Argentia cross. I can't remember his hybrid name for this one, but it's they technically are succulent. My definition of succulent is if you can step on it, it leaves a wet spot, it's probably a succulent. Well, if you stepped on this and ran over the car, it would leave a little wet spot, so it holds water in it. That's a Hectia Argentia. And these are some of the colors that these terrestrial bromeliads can get. Hectias and Dickias and Puyas are the main groups. Some of these plants that show all the color, at other times of the year, they're more greenish. So it kind of more spring than, it's mostly a springtime phenomenon, but some of them do it in the fall. They will really generate color. Like in the bottom middle, that one is always that deep purple color. That's called brittle star, Dickia brittle star. And there's a group called the Puyas, which are big bushy ones, kind of spiny, grassy looking things, and they take forever to bloom. But man, when they bloom, it's an event. That's Puya berteroniana. That's like a 6-foot tall flower tower. The one on the right is Puya rupestris, the sapphire tower. Gorgeous, gorgeous plants. You got to give them some room. They can get a couple feet across the clumps. That's another one. That's at the Cal State Fullerton Arboretum. That's probably a hybrid, they told me. It's a real pretty red flower. And this is Dickia fosteriana. So that one does have a nice orange flower. Not all of them are pretty bloom. Acmea fasciata, I believe. That's just sun stress. A lot of succulents, cactus, aloes, other things, they have a nice healthy red stress if they're kind of dry and in the sun. In habitat, they probably look like that almost all the time. In cultivation, we tend to overwater and baby our plants, but that's just a nice healthy red stress on that plant. I love these. This is called Deuteroconia. It's a type of bromeliad that just keeps mounding and mounding and mounding and doesn't stop. There's a pot inside that ball someplace. It started as a pot and just completely surrounded and engulfed the entire pot. This is up at Grow Nursery up in Cambria. I've got a beautiful one of these at my shop right now that I acquired from a collector because it's got to be 25 years old. It's almost as good as this one right here. Those are the little flowers on the left. They're not spectacular, but the plant is spectacular. These are the more traditional bromeliads, but I found that on the coast here, we can grow these just like a cactus or succulent. Full sun, water once a week, minimum care. The Acmeas, Bilbergias are pretty easy. On the right, those are Varicias. Those are a little more difficult. I threw a plumeria top right just to remind you the plumerias technically are succulent, so we can grow those too. So you can get a very tropical feel amongst your spinier plants or whatever with bromeliads. And look at all the color you get with these things. There's definitely no spines on these, but at the end of the book, I threw some cyphostemas in there just because I didn't know what other book I'd fit these into. They're wonderful fat plants from Africa. A couple of them kind of have semi-spiny leaves, but for the most part, they're not. But they're just these wonderful. You won't see too many in California this fat. You will at some of the botanic gardens. They're succulent members of the grape family. And at the very end of the book, I show some of the mostly non-spiny, but some of the fat caudiciform collector plants that those of us that are into succulents love. These very bonsai looking things. That's a Ficus palmeri from Baja, root of a rock in the middle. A bursaras on the top right and left. A plant called the bombax bottom right. On the bottom left is the Australian bottle tree that's actually hollowed itself out and still alive. You can walk inside that thing. A little hobbit home. Again, I'm just showing you some funny pictures. Over the years, as you take photos, you accumulate some weird ones. So you see faces and all kinds of funny things in some of these plants. And we're just about the end of the presentation here. Let's see. My next book I'm working on is Dudley's. That's our native soft succulent. The last book made on these was in the 80s, and it was it was kind of an amateurish effort. So I'm working with Jeremy Spath and Kelly Griffin, a couple other guys that are experts. These are our soft succulents that go from Oregon all the way down through Baja. Almost one of the very few ornamental plants from succulents from California. It's going to be a real pretty book. We hope to have it within a year. I think that's my last shot. I love the determination of that little bugger. Even though he's not letting those spines get in his way. They shouldn't get in your way either if you like these plants. If you got grandkids, my kids grew up around this stuff. It's a good life lesson. Getting poked by a cactus once when you're little. It's good for them. I'm about wrapped up. I'm hoping you guys might have some questions. But let me again promote my nursery. I hope you can take a garden club tour down there. But I'm right on 101 in Solana Beach, which is down north of San Diego, about 20 minutes north of San Diego. I've been there for 30 years now, and I just a little micro nursery, but I saw a lot of cool, weird, unusual plants. And if you like any of my books, you can go to my website, which is www.solanasucculents.com. I should have put that up on screen here, but I'll have to do that next time. I just think of Solana Succulents, you'll be able to find it. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
Yes, I have some questions. One was that I look at Amazon, only the last book is available. And if we are interested in all your books, I like to get more books about succulents and or whatever cactus. And a second question, what kind of fertilizer do you use for this? What do they need?
Well, let's go to that question first. I'm kind of a lazy feeder, but I do feed my plants, especially things in pots. Plants in the ground, I don't fertilize stuff in the ground. I figured they're on their own. But in pots, they intuitively they'll use up what soil they have. After a while, they'll use it up. The nutrients in the soil. So there's not any one that I love, but I do know that whatever you use, it should be about half strength or quarter strength. So if you have Schultz's, if Miracle Grow, as long as those numbers are sort of in the mid-range, then whatever the recommended dosage is, cut it in half. Right now I have some fish emulsion that I kind of like. It's that kind of sticky stuff. I just mix it in a big bucket of water, just a little splash. So dilute on the fertilizer. They don't need a lot. More important than that is that they're in succulent cactus mixed soil, getting good strong sun, and you water roughly once a week. That's most of it. Regarding getting the books, the Amazon, when my books get out to Amazon, that's not through me. I barely make any money when it goes out to a distributor who gets to a jobber who someone gets it to Amazon. And so that's not me even putting them out there. So if you can, I'd prefer if you can buy them on my website. The ones that are available are 4 of the 5 are available on my website right now. It's solanasucculents.com. And I'll get the order and put it out in the mail the next day or within a couple of days. I'll get to you in a few days. That's the best way. Or visit me at the nursery. I have them at my shop.
I put the address in the chat, Maria.
Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yes, now I can see.
And
Thank
if
you
you're gonna-
very much.
If you're going to get one book, the Under the Spell of Succulents is kind of a good introductory to the whole hobby. I'm down to my last 4 or 5 boxes of that book, and I probably am not going to reprint it. So that would be one to get. The other books are a little bit more specific, like the one I just did, presentation I just did. They're more specific to more of a type of plant.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
And I hope it's not too far off topic. We own a vine called a Dalachampia, and it's a euphorbia, and it likes water.
Yeah.
Any idea about, will it eat my house? How do I take care of it?
It's called a Dalachampia.
Dalachampia. I think it's called, it's not a purple wings. It's a flowering vine.
Yeah, I probably would recognize if I saw it, but that is out of my bailiwick because I know the succulent euphorbias, but there's a bunch of euphorbias. It's a huge group. Poinsettias are euphorbias. It's a huge group of plants, and that is one I'm not familiar with, so I can't.
Okay,
Sorry, I can't give you an answer.
it looks more like a poinsettia because the bracts are purple.
Yeah.
And will hopefully satisfy my daughter-in-law's need for a screen over part of our house without eating it.
Plants are
But I
functional
actually,
purpose.
that brings me to the next question. What makes a euphorbia a euphorbia? It seems like there's all these diverse plants, and if I don't know what it is, I figure it must be a euphorbia.
Well, that's always a good guess. Actually, in the succulent world, yeah, we always default to euphorbias because there's just so many of them. They go from cactusy things to bushy things to flowery things. There's so many. One of the commonalities is the white sap. I mean, there's a little weed. If you ever pulled a little flat weed and you got white stuff on your fingers, it's been a euphorbia weed from Africa or Mexico has been there for a long time. So the white sap, and there's a commonality in the type of little round flowers too after a while. So those are a couple of giveaways, but there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's cold weather euphorbias that we can't even grow here that get snowed on, that we don't even know because we can't grow them.
So is it mostly through DNA analysis? I mean, back in the.
Yeah, that would be the proper answer. That there's a scientific answer that I can't give you, but yeah, they could figure out what is and what isn't. But
Yeah.
that I wouldn't know.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I enjoyed the talk a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. How did I do on time? Did I hit the number? I wasn't even looking.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay. Hopefully I didn't send y'all to sleep. Well, if there's not any other questions, I appreciate you guys having me. I think you were going to raffle a book later, right? Or am I
Yes,
still
we
on the
are.
line?
So, Barbara, why don't you give us a number between 1 and 31?
Do I say it out loud or think?
Yes.
Say it out loud. 28.
Okay. And Jeff, one between 1 and 12.
9.
Okay, so whose birthday is September 28th? That's here today.
September. Mine's October 27.
That's close.
Mine is July 30.
Is anybody the first week of October?
Christopher is October 1 and I'm October 8. Does that help?
I'm
You're
October,
October 1?
Christopher is, yes.
Well, I think he wins unless somebody else is closer than he is. Speak now and mute yourself.
Why don't we make it closer to the end of the month, October 27th?
Well, because we picked the date of 9/28.
Oh. How about I just turned 70? So
That's good.
I think Christopher Fabian wins.
Over here.
uh,
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing it.
So Jeff, I will get you his address and then just send me an email for
Yeah, that's neat.
what,
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That will
we'll
be-
work that out.
yes.
Okay, well,
Great
great.
talk.
I hope you enjoy it. And
Does it help that he's from South Africa?
Yeah, does it
Yeah.
help, Jeff?
there's a lot of South Africa, all the euphorbia, most of the euphorbias, they're all South African plants. That's on my bucket list. I want to see South Africa before I die. All my favorite plants are from there. A lot of my favorite plants.
Well, what regions, Jeff? Maybe Chris can tell you about the different ones.
Well, aloes. I mean, a lot of the stuff I like is from South Africa, which has a similar climate, although there's a lot of different climates down there, I guess. But
Yeah, thanks for yeah.
yeah, it's just the flora, the fauna, everything. I really want to see that. I want to see Madagascar too, but that's one of these days I'll get down there.
Yeah,
Maybe you'll
grew up
start
in
growing
Cape Town.
vanilla.
He grew up in Cape Town and we used to walk to Kirstenbosch Gardens from his parents'
Oh,
house.
I really want to see that. No, I've seen so many pictures of that place. You know, up
Pretty
until recently, I
impressive.
spent most of my life as a surfer too, and there's great surf in South Africa. But at this point,
Oh,
it's not going to happen. But that's another reason to want to go there.
Yeah. So your
Wow.
book's going to a good home.
No, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Well, I'll probably get in the mail within a couple of days. So,
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
all right. Well, thank you guys.
Awesome. Well,
And
thank
when you
you,
have
Jeff,
real
for a
live in
fabulous
person
talk.
meetings someday, I hope you guys can get your meetings again in person. And maybe have me up in a couple of years. I'll do the agave talk for you.
Sure, or maybe next year.
Yeah, whenever.
Okay, well, we'll be in contact and thank you for a fabulous presentation.
Yeah, that was.
If no one else
Thank
has
you.
questions, we can
Thank you.
Are we
tell
gonna meet?
Jeff he's,
Is there any plans to meet again in like near the Palisades?
well, we're looking for a spot right now. The how would you call it? The women's club has not told us what's their rates or what we can do in terms of renting. They said they were working on a COVID protocol and that they were going to get back to us about that, but we have not heard back for either one of those things. And so we are going to probably follow up about it. But at this point, we're doing a Zoom. And hopefully in the spring, we'll be able to, maybe they'll have all of their stuff together because they said they were doing some painting and getting their stuff together. And hopefully they're going to come around with all these details so that we can, make some decisions here.
Does that mean Zoom will stop?
Well, maybe not. I think that we could probably still manage to do the Zoom as long as they have a Wi-Fi there, which I
Hmm.
think they do. They thought somehow that we had an account.
If I could put in my
Yeah.
2 cents, if I could put in my 2 cents worth on
Please
that.
do, please
As a,
do.
as a presenter, I understand that a lot of people, you want to have, there's a lot of hybrid meeting going on where it's both a live meeting and they broadcast at the same time,
Mhm.
which is great for the handful of people that can't make a meeting or don't want to drive at night or whatever. But boy, it sucks for the presenter because it's about half audience every time. People get lazy and they just stay home and watch it, and they don't. It's nice to get in person and talk to people and bring your plants in and, you know, have a real meeting.
Yeah,
So-
and see the succulents because
exactly. So the
there's
Zoom
nothing like the
Zoom is
plant
kind
in
of killing
person.
that a little bit, sadly.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna check out. Thank you, guys.
I would,
All
Bye-bye.
right, thanks, Jeff.
I would think
Bye.
I'll
maybe
send
we
you an email.
I think that maybe one of you guys have connections of like a, or be some type of commercial thing that people go to that would also bring people back to the, you know, like facility, like whatever in Palisades. Maybe if you have like connections to some place that has an office or space or something.
Well, we're looking at different things. There's a lot of possibilities. There was the Methodist church, but the room that the person recommended was only good for, you know, like 15 people, and we have quite a bit more than 15 people. So that's one situation. Other things were the community room at the center of town there where Caruso's building is, and then there was, you know, the going up and down the escalator and the driving at night. And, you know, we do have a lot of people that are 75 plus, so it is a little bit stressful for them. And so I think that a lot of them are grateful for the fact that we're here
Yeah.
for right now. And, you know, hopefully we're going to be able to get back at some point here and definitely be able to continue the Zoom for those that are a little bit further out there.
Hmm.
And for those who, you know, just can't drive at night now because of whatever the circumstances are.
Right, right.
Absolutely. I don't like to drive nighttime. PCH, it's impossible. It's so dangerous. People are crazy.
Yeah. Well, you know, maybe you can carpool with some more people. There's a couple members in Malibu over there, Maria.
Oh no, I'm behind Paul Getty Villa.
Oh, okay. Well, you're even closer.
Yeah, I am close. Yeah.
Oh, so you're just right there, right up on the hill.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we're gonna have Deborah Shaw, who's going to be our speaker for December 5th. And she will be talking to us about botanical illustration, some of her stuff and some of things that she is fascinated with. And so she will be our speaker for December. And in January, we're going to have Oliver O'Donnell, and he is our youth speaker. He is a middle school student who did present his bee thing before, and he did update it, and he is quite a bit larger than he was a couple, 2-3 years back now. As you know, kids grow like a string bean.
Mhm.
So he will be January, and then we're still looking for a February speaker. So if anybody has any ideas for a February speaker, you can let us know. We were trying to see about getting somebody for roses. So we're still working on that. And then in March, we're going to have a meeting that's going to be on Saturday meeting. It will be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time. Because the persons that are going to be presenting are on the East Coast, actually. They're a farm. It's called Harmony Harvest Farms, I believe is the name of it. And this is a family-run farm. And the lady is going to give us an excellent presentation of, you know, how her farm came to be, what she does at this farm. And Sherry Martin, our secretary, came across them in an article in Southern Living magazine. So we were lucky enough to land them as a speaker. So that's our lineup for right now. Does anybody have any questions or anything they want to share or?
No, thank you. I appreciate your help and your interest to keep us, interested and active. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Maria. Yeah, well, we have our
Yeah.
board.
We second it.
Thank
This
you.
is
Too.
Fabulous. Just
too.
Thank
everything.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have our board, all of the board members, Pam Berry, Sherry Martin, Joanne Bright, Barbara Wold, all these guys, Baruta Velisis, all of them are helping to get good speakers, and we're all working together to try and keep our
Don't have a list of
club
current
together.
members.
Wonderful job, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes.
but you don't have an updated list of members of this organization.
Oh, we do. We're gonna see about doing an online directory. I guess we're gonna try and do something along those lines. We're gonna have a meeting about that, I think, in a couple of weeks.
Oh, it would be nice. Thank
So
you.
we're gonna figure that out, and maybe we could have other things too. We're just, trying to figure out what works.
Yeah, and remain private at the same time.
Yeah, well, our meetings are open to the public, so the things
Oh.
that we do as members, we'll just make it members only.
Yes.
So, I mean, I've been trying to send out to the previous lists, and we have received a lot of new members as a result, so that's been good. And I'm happy to see some of the old faces back here.
Yeah, it's good to see you all too.
Yes, so everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and
You.
we'll see you in December, all right?
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, have a
Yep.
good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Good night. Thank you.